and you struggle because you don't like to exercise, or you struggle with the accountability, or you just don't know how, you are a prime candidate for a coach. And that might not be me. That might be another coach. There's loads of great coaches. You've had fantastic guests on this podcast who do coaching. It's about finding square pegs into square holes. Whose message do you connect with? Who do you think is going to be able to help you on your journey? And then working with them for a few months to build your base and get yourself to where you want to be. And then after that, as you mentioned, you won't need it forever. It's just to get you up and running from 0 to 1 so that you can set yourself up for the long term.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am super excited and blessed to have on the line one of the UK's top health experts. His name is Brian Keane. He has over 500,000 followers on social channels. He's also one of Ireland and UK's top health podcast hosts, regularly featured #1 on the iTunes health charts in the UK. He is a 3-time best-selling author of The Fitness Mindset, Rewire Your Mindset, and The Keen Edge, Mastering the Mindset for Real Lasting Fat Loss. And over the past 10 years, he's become one of the most recognized faces in the Irish health and fitness industry. He has spoken at many of the biggest wellness events in the UK. And on top of running his own highly successful business, he's also completed some of the world's most grueling endurance challenges, such as 6 back-to-back marathons through the Sahara Desert, a 230-kilometer through the Arctic, and multiple ultramarathons, including a 100-mile ultramarathon in the desert in Nevada. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing, amazing. Well, let's start a little bit with your background of how you got into this fitness journey and have now helped transform the lives of so many people.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different backstory to most fitness professionals. I used to be an elementary school teacher, and I spent time in California. I was actually teaching soccer in Berkeley in Northern California, and decided, okay, I'm actually going to be a teacher when I go back home. And I was 19 years of age. I moved back in to close to where I grew up, into a university, got my postgraduate degree to become a teacher, and moved to London to work in a 3rd grade class. And I was about 20 minutes into my very first day of teaching when I thought, this isn't what I want to do. I actually think I have made the wrong career choice here. And to cut a very long story short, I came home that Christmas and I was really unhappy. I was 24 years of age. I hated what I was doing. I felt that I was wasted the previous several years studying and all the energy, time and money. And my mother asked me a question on that Christmas that I've since put into books, have mentioned on podcasts, and have used on my social media channels. And that is, what would you do for free? And I thought about it. And it was the first time I had ever subjectively asked what success looked like for me that wasn't a traditional path that other people had done. And I said, well, I would work in a gym for free. I had always been massive into health and fitness. I loved working out. I loved going to the gym. And I said, if I was cleaning the floors in a gym, I'd be happier than what I'm doing now. And lo and behold, I looked into, well, how can you actually make money in this career? So she signed me up to a fitness instructor course. And then over the next several years, I fell in love with that whole industry. I became a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, a sports nutritionist. And in 2016, I moved what was then a one-to-one personal training business online. And we've been online ever since, serving people with different weight loss, fat loss, body composition programs for the last 8 years.
Amazing. What an incredible question. What would you do if you didn't care about getting paid for it, right? It's amazing. So a lot of people say that to me too, like, if you could do anything, what's your ideal daily schedule? And it's always like going to the gym right in the middle of the day, every day. If I could do that every day and just listen to my audiobooks and podcasts and train and work out at the same time, there's nothing that I enjoy more than doing that. So maybe we're blessed. I know some people, and maybe this is a mindset thing that we could talk about, but some people say, oh, I don't like working out. I mean, I just love going to the gym, and there's some things I don't love doing, like long cardio, but lifting weights and listening to audiobooks and podcasts, I guess I'm fortunate enough to actually love doing that and really enjoy it. And it gives me energy. And the days that I don't do it, I actually feel less productive than the days that I do, even though I might be spending 90 minutes, or by the time I get back and forth from the gym and do the workout and warm up and stretching, could be 2 hours out of my day that I'm working less, but yet I feel better and get more done in those days.
It's such an interesting concept, because one of the sections that got quoted back to me most from my second book, Rewire Your Mindset, was I'm very vocal about my dislike for running. For somebody that has ran multiple ultramarathons, I'm similar to you. I love lifting weights. I love doing CrossFit. I love doing strength and conditioning workouts. I love doing things that are quite highly functional, but I really dislike running, but I like having ran. And there's a section in that book that talks about self-discipline, that it's like a muscle, that the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And you build self-discipline by picking something that you know will make your life better if you did it consistently, but you don't necessarily want to do it. And one of my mentors used to tell me that the successful people that she knows, and herself included, find a way and they do the things they have to do regardless of how they feel. And when you're able to adopt that mantra, it tends to cross over into all areas of your life, whether that's weight loss, whether that's a fitness goal, a strength goal, a business goal, a relationship goal. Conditioning yourself to do the things you know you should do regardless of how you feel is actually quite a cheat code for life.
That's huge. It's a huge cheat code. Now, of course, sounds easier than it is to actually implement for many people, right? Any advice about someone who's, okay, like, especially let's say there's a lot of people listening. They might be, 20, 30 pounds overweight, trying to lose that stubborn belly fat, trying to, get back to the gym, but they can't seem to find the time, or someone like me who knows I should be doing cardio at least, a couple of times a week, and just seems to always get put on the back burner.
There's a quote that I love. I spent a little bit of time in Africa, Northern Africa more so than Sub-Saharan, but there's an African proverb that I found when I was out there about how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is you eat it bite by bite. And every goal, regardless of how big it seems to you, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 50 pounds, trying to squat 100 pounds, 200 pounds, etc., nearly every goal, particularly those within your control, controlling controllables such as weight loss, where your actions and the daily habits that you form will determine what success you have, can be broken down into smaller component parts. And I had one of my clients years ago who came to me, and she was 150 pounds overweight. And she was like, I'm never going to be able to shift all this weight. I'm like, well, we don't have to worry about losing 150 pounds today. We need to worry about losing 1 pound 150 times. I was like, that's completely different. So let's focus on this next pound. And then when we lose that, we'll go to the next pound. And when we lose that, we go to the next pound. Now, what you do every day, tell me what you do every day. I'll tell you where you'll be in a year. Your eating habits, your movement patterns, your sleep, your stress management, all of those things play a role. But ultimately, the biggest goals, whether it's weight loss or anything else, in most cases can be broken down into smaller component parts. And that's how you achieve them, i.e., how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite.
I absolutely love that. And many podcast episodes ago, there's done so many now that I'm going to probably butcher this study, but someone mentioned a study about how with long distance running, the people who are like, oh my gosh, I have to run 100 miles. It's so overwhelming. And then they just give up, right? Versus if you just like focused on, a tree that was half a mile in front of you and said, I'm just going to get to that tree. And then you get to that tree and you just focus on the next thing that's a half a mile. And I'm just going to get to that. And just exactly what you said, it just makes so much sense. So, and so many people too, I've seen this as well, like people who are like, I need to lose 20 pounds. And they're just like, I'm going to skip dinner today. I'm going to go to the gym. And they're trying to there's so much impatience. It's like, I need to lose it now. You're not going to lose 20 pounds in a day. Right. And you're not going to lose it. It's going to take some time if you're doing it the healthy way. So this is just really, really great advice, which you mentioned here. I love it.
No, I appreciate that, Laura. And something I used to always tell people in January, and I do this every single January, is when people decide that they're going to start skipping dinner, going to the gym, 7 days a week when they've only been going twice a week before, is if you can't stick to your diet or your training program the first week of June, you shouldn't start it the first week of January. And you can apply that same methodology all through the year. If you can't stick with what you're doing, and my whole nutritional principle is about find a nutritional plan that is in alignment with your goals, in this case, maybe to lose 20 pounds for weight loss, that fits into your lifestyle and schedule, because ultimately you have to be able to stick to it and be sustainable. Think consistency over intensity, and one that ideally includes foods that you enjoy for that same reason. If you're eating foods that you enjoy, and sometimes people will have that pushback, I don't like healthy food. Well, like, you generally will say, okay, have you tried all the foods though? Like, it's very easy to categorize and say, well, I'm not going to have, pizza ever again. I want to lose weight. But in reality, that's a soul food for some people. It makes you literally feel like life is better when you're eating it, but maybe you don't have a full pizza every single night and you control your nutrition around it. It's really about that balance with nutrition and weight loss in particular. 80% of the time, and having a good 80% strike rate is enough. You don't have to have it 100%. Unless you're a professional athlete looking to win gold at the Olympics or go professional in your sport, you don't need to get it right 100% of the time.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. And so what are some, okay, there's probably a lot of people listening now. I guess a couple questions I have that came to my mind. One is, of course, around some of the nutrition tips and things like that you have for people. But the other one is, because we kind of mentioned it, right? And I know someone who went from like not working out and they're like, okay, I'm going to get in shape. And they hired a trainer to do twice a day. So they went from 0 to 2 a days, right? And of course, they got burnt out and injured within a month, and then now they're back to 0 again, right? So what is, if someone has, let's say, not been working out, let's say they've barely been working out once a week, and now they're like, all right, I'm really ready to ratchet it up. You tell me, it may or may not be a good idea to go from 1 day a week to 5-6 days a week, right? Like, there's some certain kind of like, something you have to build up there, right?
Interestingly enough, the pushback I have when people go from 1 day to 5 days isn't the argument that is 5 days better than 1 day. The argument I push back on is, if you go from 1 day a week training to 2 days a week training, all of the things equal, you're going to get fitter and you're probably going to lose more weight. So going 5 days, and people think, well, if I do more, I'll get faster results. And that might be true. But if you're going too hard too soon, that's generally the biggest mistake I see with people on a weight loss journey in particular, because that all or nothing mindset serves very few people if your starting point is 20 pounds overweight. If you're, LeBron James, or you're Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, yeah, maybe an all or nothing mindset's very helpful. You're already at the top of your sport and you're trying to get into the very upper echelons. For a weight loss goal, and my philosophy has always been, you don't need extreme approaches for a non-extreme goal. And I'm not saying weight loss isn't difficult. It is difficult. It's hard to form those habits, to align your nutrition so that you can stick to a plan, to look at your sleep, to move more. That can be difficult, but it's not an extreme goal. And when people take extreme approaches like severe calorie restriction or skipping meals because they think it's what's going to help them, it's kind of like trying to hang a picture on the wall with a sledgehammer. You're using the wrong tool for the wrong job. A normal hammer would actually hammer that picture in much better into the wall. And your nutrition is similar and your training is similar. Going from 1 day to 2 days and being consistent with that, and then going from 2 to 3 over several weeks, and then 3 to 4 over several months, and building up that routine and building up that habit so that you're able to stick to it consistently is the real secret. And I get it, because we all want results yesterday, or we want them instantly. And if you can only picture the 6 months from now, you're trying to get to an end goal over the 6 week, 12 week, 18 week, 24 period, all the way up to 6 months, 12 months and beyond. You have to be able to do it consistently. Yes, you can have salad for breakfast, lunch and dinner and train twice a day. But as you said, Talor, you're probably going to get injured. You're probably going to fall off track. And then you might be in a worse position than when you started. And that's not where anyone wants to be.
Yeah. And especially the severe calorie restriction. We've talked about that in the past as well, how that can kind of really wreck your metabolism and cause, it's kind of like the whole thing about the show, The Biggest Loser, how many of them gain the weight back because it wasn't just a consistent slow thing. It was such a drastic thing that they did. And really in the end, in the short term, it may have worked out, but in the end, it didn't really serve them. So makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
I think with the metabolism, just to add on that too, one of the analogies I've used in books with the metabolism is, if you think of it like a fire, The best way to keep a fire burning isn't to wait until it goes way down and then throw a massive log on it. It's to continuously feed it, and your food, your nutrition, etc. can be similar. And with excessive calorie restriction, where you massively reduce your caloric intake, normally in the place of reduced intake of food, but not always, because you can eat very little food and have high calories. If you eat McDonald's, twice a day, you might be eating 4,000 calories, but you're actually not eating a whole lot of food. So calories matter here in terms of the quantity and nutrient density of the food. But it's important to know that when you overly calorie restrict, your metabolism can become down-regulated over time. And it's your metabolism that determines how many calories you burn at rest. So what you're looking to do is flip that script and go, well, what are the things that actually boost and elevate my metabolism? And the lowest hanging fruit on this is resistance training. It's resistance and strength training. That if you think about resistance training, what happens is you're tearing muscle fibers down, and your metabolism has to, when you're trying to repair, your metabolism will elevate, it'll boost, it'll increase. It's the fat loss equivalent of making money while you sleep. And that's why people who don't do resistance training and only do cardio, or who don't work out, will always find that they have to keep reducing calories down. What you ultimately want to do is keep your calories as high as possible, but also get your fat levels down and fat reducing, and also not confusing fat reduction and weight loss. They're two different things. Weight loss is reducing numbers on a scale. Fat loss is reducing the amount of fat in your body. They're two separate things. Sometimes people confuse them because it's very easy to manipulate weight. You pull out carbohydrates, or you load someone's water and then take it back, and then you increase and decrease their salt. You can manipulate 5-10 pounds in an average person over the space of about a week. That doesn't mean you've lost 5-10 pounds of body fat, but you have lost that on the scale. What you're looking for is reduced adipose tissue. You're looking to lower your levels of body fat. And one of the ways you do that is with strength and resistance training, so that you're burning more calories while you're resting, or what I call in my book, in the first book, The Fitness Mindset, burning fat while you watch TV. Most clickbait headline of all time, but it's explaining the concept of boosting your metabolism, so that you go to the gym, you work out for 40 minutes, you lift weights, maybe you do some cardio at the end, and then you go home and you're continuously burning calories for 24, 36, maybe even up to 48 hours after, depending on the difficulty of the session. And that's the long-term sustainable way that you can get fat levels down without dropping your calories too low.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of people, it's interesting because if you do resistance training, you could be gaining muscle and losing fat percentage, right? And that's the importance of not just only looking at a scale, but actually, I think most good gyms these days have a machine where you can go on and at least get some sort of an idea of what your body fat percentage is. And if your weight stays the same, but your body fat percentage goes down a lot, you're doing incredible, because it means you gain muscle and lost fat, right?
It's so interesting you say that, because one of my most popular ever testimonies and before and afters was from a girl that was on my online program, and she messaged me in a panic on week 8 because she said, I'm not going to step on the scale at all. I'm a little bit addicted to the scales. And she messaged at the end of week 8 and said, oh my God, I haven't dropped a pound in 8 weeks. This is a disaster. And I said, okay, did you compare your first week photos and your last week photos? And she goes, no. So I put them side by side. I sent her back to her, and she just went, wow, was her response, with the star emoji. And I said, yeah. I said, that's the difference between resistance training and building up lean muscle tissue and toning up and getting body fat down. She looked like two different people. It's a pink bikini photo on my website. It's one of my most popular before and afters. And I remember she had a freak out because the scale weight didn't change. And then she said, I'm going to throw out my scales. I'm actually never going to use these again. Photos are such a good way for people to track their progress, because we generally don't see our progress day to day. It's kind of similar to your hair growing. You don't really know until you look back on a picture from 3 weeks ago and go, oh, actually my hair's got longer, or my beard's got longer. If you're a guy, or you're growing out a beard, you don't see that, and your body composition is similar. So it's really important to get into the habit of taking photos. Yes, you can use the scale, you can use body fat calipers if you know how to use them, you can do measurements, because all of that can be helpful and useful, but ultimately your photo is not going to lie, because when you're out on a night out, or you're going for a few drinks, or you're meeting up with friends from college or friends from university, people don't ask, how much do you weigh now? They'll say, you look great, you look amazing if you've lost weight. That's ultimately what you want to go for. And sometimes it's a little bit of education on how to track your progress so that you're tracking the right thing. Otherwise, you can be very frustrated at the end when you're actually progressing, you're just tracking the wrong metric.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So yeah, I mean, strength training, one of the top things you can do to boost your metabolism and burn fat while you're sitting on the couch, essentially, right? In terms of dropping calories, though, people are going to say, well, don't I have to be in a calorie deficit? And if so, what is a safe amount? If I'm currently eating, 3,000 calories a day, how many can I go down safely? Can I go down to 2,500? Is there any recommendation there, do you think?
Yeah, there's a best practice, but also an element of, and I'm nutritional evidence support is the way I approach things. I very rarely will try and give a recommendation while having evidence to support what I'm saying. So calorie control plans, calorie deficits show and are the most researched approach for people losing body fat. Yes, there's other methods that people will claim can work, but ultimately it's about calorie control. Whether you're intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet, carnivore, vegan, it's controlling calories in order to get body fat down. It's just energy in, energy out. It's thermodynamics 101. But when it comes to getting it down and tracking in terms of your numbers, I have a two-prong approach that I get people to look at. First is you can use things like a TDDE calculator, which is a total daily energy expenditure calculator. It's basically a BMR calculator, a basic metabolic rate calculator, which is the amount of calories you need just to stay around the same weight, all other things equal if you lied in bed for the day. A TDDE, a total daily energy expenditure calculator, is that plus your activity. So it's going to be a more accurate reference point in terms of a starting number. So for example, my TDDE number is about 2,700 calories per day. So for me to stay the same weight, all other things equal, I need to be eating around 2,700 calories depending on my activity because of the amount I walk, the steps I do, and my workout routine. So anything below that number for me is technically a calorie deficit. Anything above that number is technically a calorie surplus. But where it can break down is where people don't test it. We're human beings. We're flesh, we're blood, we're not machines. So people can get caught up on the numbers and it'll come back and say, you're 2,713 calories, Brian, and you need to hit that number every single day. That is a better ballpark than randomly throwing darts against a dartboard and just picking a number from thin air. But you also have to test it. And the way you do that is you see if your body fat is reducing. So if I'm in a fat loss phase or putting somebody into a fat loss phase and my TDD calculator in this case and my number is 2,700, I might go to 2,500 calories, a 200 calorie deficit per day. And then I'll track with photos or I'll track with body fat calipers or measurements. And then I'll check back in a week and see, did my fat levels go down? If they did, I'll keep going as is. And if it stalls, because what happens is, it's not always set. You might have to make adjustments if you start to plateau, or you might have to change up training, or you might have to change up some other external stimulus from the outside, i.e. improve your sleep quality, your stress management, maybe balance hormones if they're out of balance anywhere based on food choices or stress, etc., your cortisol, your stress hormone. All of these things will play a role with body fat reduction. So it's not an echo chamber of just get your calorie number right and hit that, because in some cases people will be in a deficit and they still won't be shifting body fat, and that's when they go look at hormone balancing, etc. But the quote I give in books is, when you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. Meaning when you're not losing body fat, think that your calories are too high, not that your hormones are out of balance. That not to say that you hear footsteps or hooves and it's not a zebra. It might be, but the chances are it's probably horses, i.e. if you can't reduce body fat, the chances are your calories are too high. I'm not saying it's not other things, but there's a probably 80 to 90% chance that you're just documenting it wrong, incorrectly, not using the right app to track it, or your calories are just higher than you think, or you're consuming extra food and not tracking it. And that's what you actually need to get on top of.
Interesting. How, I don't think I've never measured to my knowledge, my, is it TDDE, the total daily expenditure? Yeah. Mm-hmm. How does a person listening right now, they say, okay, well, what is my normal, calorie intake that would keep me at the same, that I know if I went a couple hundred lower, I'd be at a deficit?
You just Google it. The thing is with the TDD calculator, they're kind of a set number, similar to BMR calculators. They're going to give you a ballpark. Now, you can't the biggest issue I have with this, and I have to clarify it on the front end, is it's a starting point number. And it's to give you a ballpark in which to start. This is why working with a professional can help, because most of them will do it. I can look at somebody, or any other coach can look at somebody and go, okay, you're 180 pounds, your body fat level is here. We probably need to have you at 2,000 calories, or we probably need to have you at 2,200 calories. It's very easy for me, because I've been doing this for over a decade, to look at somebody, but you don't need a coach to do that. You can use Google to get a TDD calculator, and it'll give you a ballpark number. And the only reason I say that is it's better than picking one randomly, because generally people go with the guidelines that they've been told for years: 1,500 calories, 2,000 calories, 2,500 calories if you're male, and it doesn't take anything else into consideration. So at least that gives you an idea of what your basic metabolic rate is, the amount of calories you need to just stay alive if you were lying in bed all day, plus your activity levels, and then you can work from that numbers, and you can go up or downwards. The same way as if you might, in the example I gave earlier, if I drop to 2,500 calories, I might go up to 2,600 if I am still losing body fat at a good rate, because I'm like, well, it's an extra 100 calories. I might be able to factor in a small chocolate bar every day, and that makes me happier to be living life, and it allows me to stick with it over the long term in terms of sustainability. So you want to make those adjustments. You don't have to have a coach to do that. You can do this yourself. It just really is about arming yourself with a bit of front-end knowledge so that you can apply what it is that you need to know, so that you can make those adjustments accordingly.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I will say, I always say this, I highly recommend people do get a coach, do sign up for some sort of program or something to learn the way, especially if you've been struggling with this for some period of time. There is no better investment you can make than in your own health, right? We always say the old proverb of a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has only one. You could have all the money in the world. If you are, have a disease or you're dying, you would give up all that money just to heal yourself. And this is something where I've just seen people are not proactive enough. People are way too reactive and waiting until after the fact, until they get a diagnosis, and then they're trying to, scramble to change. This is the most important thing in your life. And I pride myself on doing a lot of thinking time in the mornings, going outside and thinking, okay, what is the most important thing in my life? What is the biggest goal in my life that if I achieve this one goal, everything else is kind of secondary and doesn't matter? And for me, it's the health and happiness of me, my wife, my daughters, my family, right? If we can all live long, happy, healthy lives as a close-knit family, everything else is secondary. Whether I make this much money or whatever it is, all that is really secondary. And so from that place, and it's funny because I know some super, super ultra wealthy people, but they won't take an hour out of their day to go exercise and go to the gym, or they won't hire a trainer or whatever it is. They'll make the investment in everything else except for themselves, and neglect the most important thing. It's like, what's the purpose of having all this money if you pass away at 65 when you could have lived to 95 and be there with your family and your kids and meet your grandkids? I have a goal of meeting my great grandkids, if it happens to be the case someday. So I just think that really thinking about the most important thing is health, and making it up so when you realize that, it's clear that it needs to be a priority. And so the best way to do that is to get educated, get someone who can show you the way. You don't have to have a trainer forever, but if you had one for at least a few months or a year, it would probably make a huge difference to get that guidance and build up that confidence in yourself that you're doing things the right way.
It's such a brilliant point, Laura, because if you are 20 or 30 pounds overweight, it means that there's probably a gap either in your knowledge on what you need to do, or you don't have the accountability structure in place to stick with the thing that you need to do. And some people have this with health and wellness. It's why I have a profession and I was able to set up a fitness company. But for me, I have an equivalent. I have to go to a yoga teacher every week, and I'm accountable to her as a coach because I am very inflexible and have spent years training without doing any of the corresponding flexibility work. But I didn't need help when it came to my fitness because I always loved going to the gym, similar to you. So if you're listening to this podcast and you struggle because you don't like to exercise, or you struggle with the accountability, or you just don't know how, you are a prime candidate for a coach. And that might not be me. That might be another coach. There's loads of great coaches. You've had fantastic guests on this podcast who do coaching. It's about finding square pegs into square holes. Whose message do you connect with? Who do you think is going to be able to help you on your journey? And then working with them for a few months to build your base and get yourself to where you want to be. And then after that, as you mentioned, you won't need it forever. It's just to get you up and running from 0 to 1 so that you can set yourself up for the long term.
Yeah. And I'm smiling as well, because in about 90 minutes from now, I'm going to my trainer that I go to once a week for mobility. Because again, I don't have the problem lifting weights and doing that stuff, but I realize that I'm always like, okay, I need to do more mobility. And I'm just, for some reason, it's falling to the back, and the weights has been the priority. So I said, you know what? I'm hiring a trainer who's going to force me to just do mobility for 1 hour every week and give me some exercises I can do on my own. And so, so that's the thing. As you kind of get in your growth of your physical fitness, you'll realize, okay, wow, well, my mobility is lacking a little bit. Like, I can't barefoot squat all the way down and stay balanced very good. So it's like, I need to work on that. My ankles are maybe lacking some mobility. I need to fix that. So you start, accelerating in your journey as you go along, which I think is great. I'd love to ask you about, because I'm always fascinated with the psychological side of things, right? Actually, first, let me ask you one thing before we get into the psychology and the mindset and why, what has helped your clients achieve the success that they've achieved, and why some people don't achieve the success, the psychological aspects. I'm always fascinated by, like, people in general can pretty easily find out what to do to be healthy, but why don't they do it? But one thing I just want to circle back to real quick before we move on to that is, we've talked a lot about fat loss, and a lot of people from the old school days think fat loss means eating less fat, like in foods. Right. And it's something that I always want to bring up, because, if you just cut out all the healthy fats from your diet, then it's possible you may lose some weight by being in a calorie deficit. But for me, I've always said that one of the most important things about health is lowering inflammation in the body. And for me, over 11 years ago, when I had massive pain and inflammation in my body, I was able to lower that by going on a paleo style, lower inflammatory kind of, even to this day, I just feel way better on a lower carb, higher protein, kind of medium to high fat diet. But of course, my fats are coming from, coconut oil or C8 MCT oil or olive oil, right? These kind of things. So can you just clarify for people who are thinking, fat loss, does that mean they should be stopping the fat intake, or what's your opinion on all that?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I always think of reducing fat too low to reduce body fat as like trying to drive your car with 3 wheels. Like, you can do it and it'll go, but it's definitely not optimal. And with fat, if we're thinking calorie control and calorie deficit, the disadvantage fat has is, for every 1 gram of fat, there's 9 kilocalories. For every 1 gram of carbohydrate or protein, there's 4 kilocalories. So it's very easy for people to think, I need to reduce calories. Fat has has more than double what carbs or protein have. I'm going to reduce back my fat intake. But the mistake is, not all fats are created equal. The ones you mentioned there, olive oil, MCT oil, oily fish, for those who eat fish or are pescatarian, they're completely different to your seed oils potentially, or the trans fatty acids in, McDonald's or Wendy's, etc. And when you think about dietary fat as something that will keep you satiated, which is one of the biggest benefits of it, meaning that you'll feel fuller for longer compared to carbohydrates generally. Sometimes good complex carbohydrates have higher fiber, so they can keep you fuller for longer as well. Your porridge oats, steel cut oats, your brown rice, etc. But your healthy fat will keep you satiated. It also is key for hormonal production, whether you're male, female, transgender, whatever pronoun you want to use. For balancing out hormones, you need to have a certain level of dietary fat in there. And I see a lot of men who will try and cut back their fat intake, and their testosterone will plummet. And then they'll find it really hard to shift body fat. Their sex drive will go really low. For females, the same thing. They can have really poor brain fog, gut health, struggling with their cycle. If they're perimenopausal, it can make those effects way worse. And if you just keep your dietary fat at a decent level, whatever that is for you, it's such a relative term, from 30 grams to 90 grams for, depending on your starting point, if you're male, female, 250 pounds or 150 pounds to start with. But dropping it back too low is a recipe for failure, not because it doesn't control your calories. It probably will. it's because it'll have all these other negative impacts, which will actually reduce your quality of life, which defeats the whole purpose. Like, you can look great, lose body fat, but if you have no sex drive, no energy, low mood, you're not recovering from sessions, and you're just walking around like a bit of a zombie because you feel brain fog and you're not concentrating well, and not to mention all the issues with your heart and vital organs when you reduce dietary fat too low, it just doesn't make life worth living. So controlling dietary fat, keeping it in to your level, so you've controlled for the calories and then your protein with it and your carbohydrates with it, is really something that most people should look into.
Yeah. It's something I always want to make clear, because sometimes when we talk about counting calories and fat loss, people are like, oh, I should go from drinking whole milk to low fat milk, or whatever the case may be. And again, just cutting out the fat necessarily. And again, the other thing, we had a guest on a few episodes ago as well that talked about his satiety index per calorie, right? So yes, calories in, calories out matters. There's also something though it's called a satiety index per calorie, and protein has the highest satiety, right? So if you start your diet around protein and prioritize protein, you're going to be more satiated. If you're eating tons of carbs tend to be less satiating, so you'll tend to eat more and be more hungry to eat more. So there's something there too. So it's not just straight like, these people, some people are like, well, it is calories counting because, didn't you hear the study about the guy who all he ate was Twinkies, but he was on a calorie deficit and he lost weight? And it's like, yeah, but what about his inflammation markers in his body? What about how he felt? What about his hormones? What about everything else? Or, show me that guy a year later if all he's eating is Twinkies still too. So really, really glad that we got to talk about that. I do want to transition now into the psychological aspects, which is always what fascinates me. It's like, people know what to do. Why aren't they doing it? What are some of the things, and you mentioned a great one earlier, which I think is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time and taking one step at a time? And, if you just focused on, hey, if you want to lose weight, for example, if you just, instead of saying I got to lose 100 pounds, it's like, what if let's focus on this week. Can I lose 1 pound this week? Right. And if you do that for 52 weeks, you lost 52 pounds. Right. So what are some other kind of mental frameworks or things that you are teaching your clients that has really led to their success?
There's a couple of things, and I mentioned two of them earlier, that education and accountability are probably two of the biggest issues people have when it comes to hitting any goal. If you don't have the education and you don't know how to do it, you can't hit a target you can't see, and you definitely can't get there if you don't know how. So education is an issue for some people. Accountability can also be an issue, meaning that you know what you should do, but you just can't stick to it. In the case of, me and you, Talora, with yoga and mobility, we just have somebody that we're accountable to, and it keeps us on path. Outside of that, the biggest issue I see is normally self-sabotage and behavioral issues or behavioral psychology around food. And one of the things that I tried to educate people in the last book, which is very much on topic for everything we talked about here in the Keen Edge, is not separating food into good and bad categories, because that normally leads to self-sabotage in a lot of cases. And I'm not saying there's not foods that will help you with your goal. There's definitely foods that will support you, i.e. high nutrient satiating foods versus low nutrient, calorie dense foods, your ice creams, your chocolate, your cookies. But it's all about context. And something that I have to tell people regularly is, if they've came off the back of dieting clubs or years of dieting culture that has programmed them to think in ways that actually isn't conducive to, one, the research when it comes to nutrition, but also it's very out of alignment with what they're looking to do in terms of finding a nutritional plan that they can stick to. If you can make your food and your nutrition automatic, meaning it's just the way that you eat, which can take time, weeks, months, years in some cases, that's another cheat code for longevity. And the first question I generally get people to ask when it comes to those who have an issue with food psychology or food behavior is the separating food into the good and bad categories. I tell them that food has no morals. A broccoli is not going to save you from a burning building, and a chocolate bar is not going to stab you down a back alley. We project our morals onto the food. But yes, broccoli is more nutrient dense and lower calorie, and a chocolate bar is low nutrients and high calorie. But if you were following a 1600 calorie plan, and the thing that allows you to stick to that plan is your 2 cookies every evening, or your chocolate bar, or a little bit of ice cream, or a slice of pizza, and you've controlled and factored in that calorie, and 80% of your food has been nutrient dense, healthy fats, complex carbs, fruits, vegetables, complete proteins, and then you have your chocolate bar thrown in or your cookies thrown in, amazing. That's what keeps you on plan over the long term. That's what you should stick to. And generally when people fall off, it's because they've got overwhelmed from the goal, similar to the elephant and the bite by bite. They've set the goal too big. They've got too extreme too soon. They've lost all momentum, and then they fall off plan. Or they have the self-sabotage around separating those foods into those good and bad categories. And as a result, they can't actually build out a nutritional plan that they can stick to over the long term because they're running off miseducation around nutrition.
Yeah. And it's a great point, because there are people like me who have gone through pain and inflammation, and I'm just like, never again. Right. And so like, for me, I'm just like, no, I don't eat sugar. And that when I drink alcohol, I just feel so horrible that it doesn't make any sense to me. Right. So there's just certain things that I do have pretty strict rules, and people say to me, oh, but that's the thing. I have to remember, not everyone is like me or has been through something like I've been through. And I hear people say to me all the time, it's like, well, you're so disciplined. I could never be like you. Right. But I love the point that you're making, is that you don't have to be. First of all, no one should be comparing themselves to anyone else or anything else anyway, but you don't have to be perfect 100% of the time. And there are certainly people, and in fact, there's a guy out there who's basically teaching everyone, which I'm not sure I agree with this one, but he says never skip dessert, right? As long as you're in your calorie thing, in terms of, and he's obviously jacked and ripped, and he's on some hormones and other things as well. But again, he's like, you can eat dessert every night as long as it's within your calorie range. And obviously a lot of people like that and enjoy that. But I think finding the right balance, what you just said, is really, really key for people. And I think it's just important for them to work with someone who can help them come up with the right plan, and help keep it in alignment in some way, right? So I think a lot of people are too much all or nothing, right? And then maybe you have to know if you're that type of person that's an all or nothing person. But if you can give yourself some treats, but for the most part, stay healthy. Like you said, 80% healthy. I think that's really good advice.
I love that, Talor, and I want to build on your point, because my professional preference as a coach is that 80-20, but my 100% philosophy with life is finding what works for you, because everyone's starting point is different. Everyone's history is different. I know you struggled with the inflammation and had to remove those foods, and people with disordered eating patterns might never be able to reintroduce some of those foods, or those who have potential intolerances or inflammatory responses. That's okay. It's very much down to finding what's going to work for you. And what I try and get people to do is just see that there's lots of different approaches, and you have to try them on. It's like shoe sizes. You go into a room and there's 50 different shoes. One or two of those shoes will probably fit you perfectly. Some of them will be way too tight, some will be way too big. And diets are very similar, and nutritional plans are very similar. It's about trying things on and seeing what fits for you. And the approach I always get people to consider is, look, you have to experiment. And I'm probably one of the most frustrating people ever to argue with on social media, because I create lots of reels, lots of content, and I normally use the evidence to support what I'm saying. And I will always have people in the comments go, well, I did the opposite of that and got results. And my answer is always like, I'm delighted you got what you were looking for. And yes, I'm talking about the best practice, but you found something, you're an outlier, and did the opposite and it worked. And I'm delighted that's worked for you. And that's true. In everything from cardio recommendations to training to nutrition to supplements to sleep, all the way across the spectrum. The problem with the internet, and the best thing about the internet, is we can be a little bit starved for knowledge, drowning in information. So you have to identify who it is that you trust, experiment with it yourself, see if it fits, and know that not everything similar to the shoes is going to fit you, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's probably what you just said is probably the biggest thing I've learned from this podcast. I'll admit, when I first started this podcast, I was a bit dogmatic. I was like, paleo is what worked for me, lower carb, high protein, high fat, lower carb, lowered my inflammation. My pain is gone. I feel better than I ever have. So this is the way. Why can't you all see this? Why aren't you all doing this? This is so obvious. That was my attitude. But after, 150 plus episodes and seeing, well, we have carnivores on here that feel great. We have vegans on here that are doing great. We have, everything in between. So it really is what you said, really makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the key is try different things, right? And when you find something that works for you, don't be so dogmatic about it. Who knows, in a few years, you might want to do something different. And just because it worked for you doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for everyone else. So I'm a little bit, I try to be more aware of, myself and what I say and how, when other people ask me for advice. But what you said was really great. So I absolutely love that. And I think working with someone like yourself who can help, come up with a nutrition plan that is personalized and works for the exact person, come out with a workout plan, things like that is really, really powerful. So I'd love to let people know you have a podcast, you have books, you're on social. Where can people follow you, find you, learn more?
Oh, thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, the Brian Keane podcast is my flagship show. Brian Keane Fitness on Instagram is probably the best place to check out content. And then my books are everywhere books are found: The Fitness Mindset, Rewire Your Mindset, and The Keen Edge, which is probably the best one for anyone that got a lot from this podcast. It's very much down to everything we discussed with the weight loss, body fat, nutrition, finding what's going to work for you. So yeah, people can definitely check out The Keen Edge. I think there'll be a lot of value in that. Or the podcast. I have an episode, Nutrition Deep Dive 291, which is a very popular episode. It's free because the podcast obviously is free. It's our way to serve people in a meaningful way. And it goes through all of what we talked about here in a little bit more detail.
Absolutely love that. And, I always say to people, if you do this thinking time and realize, like we spoke about earlier, that health is the most important thing in your life, then it's important to continue to get educated. So first of all, congratulations. I commend everyone who's listening right now for investing in yourself and investing in your health by listening to this. And I would encourage you to continue listening. It's funny because many of these business people I know, they go to business seminars and they read business books. And if I ask them, hey, how many health podcasts or health books have you read in the last year? They're like, I don't know, right? So it's really important to invest in your health, invest in your education of health. And Brian, you've just been an absolute joy. Your energy from the first second we started talking has been absolutely incredible. And that kind of energy matters too. Like the trainer that I go to, it's like, no matter how I'm feeling when I walk in there, like, I don't know today. I don't even know if I could do it today. And then she's like, hey, like, how you doing? And I'm like, okay, I'm in it, And so I really sense that uplifting energy from you, and it's really contagious and inspiring. So thank you for everything you're doing and all the people that you're helping, and highly encourage people to follow you and learn more.
Oh, thank you so much for the beautiful words, Laura, and a great conversation. So thank you so much for bringing me on and letting me share the message, and hopefully it helps a lot of people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.